The compliance scanner spoke in 3 tones, and Oveth Drell had heard it only once before in her career, 11 years ago, during a minor procurement dispute that had resulted in a single councillor's voluntary abstention and 2 weeks of quiet embarrassment in the trade press. She had not expected to hear it today. She had not expected to hear it 19 times. The first tone came at the exact moment Councillor Prathek raised his hand. The chamber was the Meridian Compact's Trade Block Assembly Hall, and it was full. Oveth counted 87 seated members, 11 standing observers along the curved wall, and 3 representatives of the Compact's senior administrative body seated in the tier above the main floor. The vote had been scheduled for 3 weeks. Its outcome had been, for most of those 3 weeks, considered certain. The exclusion order on the table would formally bar human commercial vessels from the outer corridor trade routes, a corridor that accounted, according to the most recent compact ledger, for roughly 14% of human cargo transit and a larger percentage of human medical resupply to the outer settlements. The order was procedurally legitimate. The votes were confirmed. The Assembly chair had opened the formal session with the particular efficiency of someone who knows the result in advance and does not intend to spend unnecessary time arriving at it. Oveth had confirmed her own vote 2 weeks ago. Under pressure, with the specific quality of pressure that does not require threats to be effective, just the understanding of who is watching, which direction the majority is moving, and what the consequences of deviation look like for a mid-career Ketharan councillor with a seat that comes up for renewal in 14 months. She had told herself it was pragmatic. She had almost believed it. Councillor Prathek's hand went up. The scanner's first tone sounded, a clean 3-note sequence that carried through the chamber's acoustic system with a clarity that silenced the residual murmur of conversation across the floor. A line of text appeared on the compliance display above the voting registry. Disclosure conflict, ethics file ref. 7 Delta 09, registrant, PRETHEK, I. Vote suspended pending review. Prathek lowered his hand. He looked at the display. His expression was the expression of a person encountering a piece of furniture in a room where there had been no furniture before, not alarm, exactly. More like the specific confusion of a brain that has not yet processed the change in environment. The chair looked at the administrative tier. The senior administrator looked at his own screen. Across the hall, at the far end of the observer section, Oveth found herself looking at the human. Kira Senn was 26 years old, junior advisor to the Human Trade Liaison Office, and she had been present at every session of this assembly for the past 3 months in a capacity that the Compact's official records listed as observational support staff. She was slight, with the particular stillness of someone who moves slowly on purpose. She was wearing the plain gray jacket of a junior trade office staffer, no insignia, no formal diplomatic credentials. She was sitting in the last seat of the observer row, next to a Teruvian administrative clerk who was considerably taller than she was, and paying no attention to her at all. She was not looking at the display. She was not looking at the chair. She was looking at the floor in front of her feet with the expression of someone waiting for a transit connection, patient, settled, entirely present. The chair said, "Councillor Thevarak, your vote." Thevarak raised his hand. The second tone. Disclosure conflict, ethics file ref. 7 Delta 09, registrant, THEVARAK, M, vote suspended pending review. The murmur that started in the chamber was not the panicked sound of surprise. It was the particular sound of a large room realizing in pieces that the architecture of the next few minutes was different from what it had believed. Voices low, fast, sideways, people checking their terminals, checking the display, checking the faces of the people around them. The chair called the next name. The scanner sounded the third tone before the hand was fully raised. Oveth sat very still. She understood the mechanism now. She had understood it from the second tone, though she had not wanted to. The Meridian Compact's vote compliance system cross-referenced all outstanding Ethics Oversight Board disclosures against any registered vote as a matter of automated procedure, a process that normally ran silently and returned nothing, because disclosures of the relevant type were genuinely rare. The relevant type being a formal ethics disclosure naming a specific councillor as having received inducements affecting a specific pending vote. There was a file, there was a disclosure. It had been filed with the Ethics Oversight Board, dated 3 weeks ago, 2 days before the vote had even been formally scheduled. It named, apparently, every councillor who had confirmed their vote in advance. It had been sitting in the system ever since, invisible and inert until the moment the vote began, at which point the compliance scanner had done exactly what it was built to do. Someone had filed it. The fourth tone, the fifth. The chamber was no longer murmuring. It was generating the specific quality of noise that comes from a large group of people who are all, simultaneously, revising their understanding of a situation. The chair called for a recess. The administrative senior gave a single short answer that meant no. Under compact procedure, a compliance suspension could not be recessed mid-vote. The vote either completed with all eligible members or it was formally voided by the system. The chair could not pause it. The chair could not adjourn it. The process would run until every name had been called and every flag had been returned, and then the registry would record whatever it recorded. The sixth tone, the seventh. Oveth looked down at her hands on the desk in front of her. They were very still. The Ketharan physiological response to pressure was internal rather than visible, a change in circulation, in temperature, in the quality of awareness, rather than the external trembling that some species displayed. She was aware that her awareness had sharpened considerably in the past 2 minutes. She was aware of the space between her palms and the desk surface. She was aware of her own name, sitting in the queue, approaching. She had been given, she understood now, a choice she had not known she was being given. Before the vote opened, the choice had been, sign or face the consequences of not signing. That was the choice she had made 2 weeks ago, in the full belief that it was the only choice available. Now there was a different question. Her name was in the disclosure. The scanner would flag her vote regardless of which way she cast it. The disclosure was triggered by the act of voting, not by the direction of the vote. The compliance flag would appear. The ethics review would begin. The inducement she had accepted, the quiet, deniable, procedurally untraceable inducement, would be in the Oversight Board's file. It was already there. Kira Senn had put it there 3 weeks ago. The eighth tone, the ninth. Oveth looked up. Across the chamber, the human was still watching the floor in front of her feet. She did not appear to be tracking the tones. She did not appear to be counting. She was sitting with her hands loose in her lap and her weight settled back in the chair, and she had the quality. Oveth had seen this quality in very few people, and never in someone this young, of a person who has already done the thing that needed doing, and is now simply waiting for the world to finish catching up. The chair called Oveth's name. She raised her hand. The tone sounded. Disclosure conflict ethics file ref. 7 Delta 09 registrant. DREL O vote suspended pending review. Her hand came down. Around her the process continued. Tone by tone. Name by name. The air in the chamber had the quality of the air in a room where something structural has shifted, not collapsed, not broken, but moved irrevocably in a direction that changes the geometry of everything else. Voices had stopped almost entirely. The administrative tier was in quiet, rapid consultation. The chair was not calling the next name with the brisk efficiency of before. There was a fractional pause now before each name, as if the pause was a courtesy, or an acknowledgement, or simply the involuntary hesitation of a person performing an action whose endpoint they can now see clearly and had not expected to see this way. By the 13th tone, it was clear to the full chamber what the final count would be. By the 16th, The administrative senior had stopped consulting his terminal and was sitting with his hands folded, and an expression that was unreadable in the way that the expressions of very senior officials sometimes become unreadable under pressure. Not empty, just entirely contained. The 19th tone. The compliance display updated. Vote void, 19 of 19 eligible registrations suspended, ethics file ref. 7 Delta 09 active, full review initiated, assembly session dissolved. The hall went quiet in the specific way of a room that has just watched something happen that it will be processing for a long time. The chair said something. The words did not carry. Ovath sat in her seat for a long moment after the others began to move. The sessions she had attended in this chamber over the course of her career had a particular rhythm to their endings: paperwork, consultations, the shuffle of councillors who needed to speak with other councillors, the specific social navigation of a political body that has just concluded a contested session. She was familiar with that rhythm. It did not apply today. Today, the people leaving the floor were moving with the quality of people who have been individually named in an active ethics review and are not sure what to do with their next 2 minutes, let alone the rest of the day. She did not move toward the exit with them. She was not sure where she was moving. She sat and looked at the compliance display, still showing the file reference, still live, until the chamber had mostly emptied and the only people left were administrative staff beginning the documentation process and a few observers who had not yet left. One of them was still in the last seat of the observer row. Ovath walked across the chamber floor. It was a long walk, and she made it without entirely deciding to. Her feet simply moved in that direction, and then she was standing at the edge of the observer section, and Senn was looking up at her with the calm, direct attention of someone who has been expecting this particular moment. "You filed that 3 weeks ago," Ovath said. 22 days ago, Kira said, before the vote was officially scheduled. Before you could have known whether it would be enough. "I knew what was in the file," Kira said. "I didn't know how many councillors it named until the disclosure was complete. It named 19. A pause, not uncomfortable. That was enough." Ovath looked at her. The question she wanted to ask was not a difficult one to form, but it was a difficult one to ask without it sounding like an accusation, which she did not intend. "The Ethics Oversight Board review will be public," she said. "The disclosure is a formal record. The named parties will face scrutiny. Your own role in assembling the file will be documented." She stopped, started again. "You are a junior advisor on a temporary liaison posting. After this, no compact body will engage you in any official advisory capacity." "Probably not," Kira said. "You knew that before you filed." Kira did not answer immediately. She looked at the compliance display, still showing the file reference in the otherwise emptying chamber. When she looked back at Ovath, her expression had the quality that Ovath had been trying to name since she first noticed it: not satisfaction, not triumph. Something quieter. The expression of someone who has carried a weight for a long time and has just set it down in the right place. "The exclusion order would have cut medical resupply to 11 outer settlements," Kira said. "Not trade disruption, medical supply. The settlements don't have alternative routes. I did the transit modeling 4 months ago." A pause. "I spent 2 months looking for another way to stop it. There wasn't one that left the chamber intact. The votes were confirmed. The process was legitimate on its face." She folded her hands in her lap. The file was the only move that worked. The chamber around them was almost empty. The compliance display was still live. "You gave up your career to make it," Ovath said. "I gave up my career in the compact," Kira said. "That's not the same thing." She glanced at the display one more time, then stood and picked up the plain gray satchel beside her chair. "The review will take 8 months, maybe 10. The names are in the record now. That's what matters." She nodded to Ovath, not the deferential nod of a junior staffer to a seated councillor, but the even, direct acknowledgement of one person to another, and walked toward the side door at the end of the observer row. Ovath stood at the edge of the empty chamber and watched her go. The compliance display showed file reference 7 Delta 09, still active, timestamp running forward. 19 names documented. 1 vote voided. 11 settlements, their supply chain intact. 1 26-year-old human advisor who had known, 22 days ago, exactly what winning the right way would cost and had filed the paperwork anyway. Ovath looked at the display for a long time. Then she turned and walked toward the administrative exit to begin the process of responding to the review that had, in the last hour, become the most important professional matter of her remaining career. She did not think she would recover from it easily. She also did not think, and this was a new thought with a particular texture arriving late, that recovering from it was the thing she needed most to do.